So, folks, it is Tuesday night as we are doing this live stream. If you watch the clip version of this, you know this by now, but let's talk a little bit about this anyway, because I spent the weekend in New Hampshire covering the primary, and as soon as the clock struck 8 o'clock, pretty much, as soon as the clock struck 8 o'clock, pretty much, by about 8:01, that is when the second round of polls closed in the state of New Hampshire, and that is when the Associated Press called the race for the king himself, Donald J. Trump, projected winner of the New Hampshire Republican primary as it stands right now.
Although
as we
actually,
are doing this stream, 36% of the votes in. Yep. Trump 53-4, Haley 45-6. The projected margin, Trump plus 11. So not the 20-point landslide that some of the polls were saying, at least not according to this pace. You know, that could change, obviously. But a solid enough win.
Here comes Ron.
Yeah, here comes Ron DeSantis at 733 votes coming out of retirement. A solid enough win to pretty much put the primary on ice. This was the place. If Haley couldn't win here, where is she going to win? This is the state that she made this big investment in. At this point, you really can't even say she looks good in South Carolina. I had a feeling Trump would blow out the competition in Iowa, parlay that into a win in New Hampshire, and that would pretty much be it. As of now, Haley is saying she is determined to stay in. That's kind of what they all say. We'll see if that happens. Because the other thing that was very favorable to Nikki Haley in this race was that it is an open primary. So a lot of Democrats and independents were able to vote for her. And as you saw in my video coverage, for those of you who watched it, especially the second Haley event I went to, not so much the first, but the second Haley event I went to, most of the people I talked to were actually Democrats or independents. So you talk about a state that was favorable terrain for her as opposed to a lot of the closed primary states where you have to be a registered Republican, where Trump does even better. At this point, the herd has been thinned to just Trump and Haley. So you can pretty much put the Republican primary on ice. And this just speaks to the staying power of Donald Trump. He really is the most significant political figure of our lifetime, I think, much more than Obama. If there is a... You know how there was the Reagan era, and then Obama was supposed to take us out of the Reagan era into the Obama era, but really didn't? I think you could safely say we are in the Trump era right now. Yep. He has commanded this party for now almost a decade straight. And if he wins again, that'll, stretch his reign to 15 years or so. He just has a grip on this party, and no one was able to break through against him. And this victory here tonight may not be the total route that some would have expected or hoped for, but it's plenty to make the case that nobody's going to beat him. I mean, if Haley couldn't beat him here, where's she going to beat him? At the end of the day, if you want to beat him, you got to beat him. You got to win. You can't just come close every time and say, we're getting there. No, she had to win here. She did not win here. And so we are, for all intents and purposes, in general election mode.
I still think, and this is not a Ron DeSantis thing, I promise. I still think this could be decided at the convention. I still think he could be convicted on one of his charges. I would not call this settled by any means, because you have factors at play that have just unprecedented. There are just too many things going on that are unprecedented.
Of course, but at this point, you could say, barring any unforeseen developments, we are in general election mode.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, no matter who winds up the president, yes, we're in the Trump era, even if we don't wind up with Donald Trump as the president. Yeah. I've many times made the Reagan comparison. Because being like a weird kid who was interested in what was happening around me in society, I remember the Reagan change. And if you don't remember that, you cannot imagine how drastically the entire culture can about face and go in a different direction. One day, It was John Belushi doing an ODing on heroin bit on Saturday Night Live. The next day, it was brown suits and Morning in America. It was, boom, overnight, it flipped. I think you're going to see something similar over the next couple of years.
In a sense, you already have. I mean, think about it. Think of what America was in October of 2016. It was Sarah Bareilles, say what you want to say. You know, it was the Obama era. It was woke neoliberalism, woke imperialism, woke globalism. You know, things were getting worse for most people, but it seemed like the establishment had their grip on power. It seemed like no one was really worried about Trump winning, and it changed on a dime. As soon as the votes came in, right around 9:30, when Trump took the lead in Florida, everybody realized, oh, we're about to live in a completely different world than the world 5 minutes ago. So in a sense, it's already done that first change. Now, this second incarnation is, you know, perhaps 8 years later, things only having gotten worse, which means it could be scarier, probably will be scarier. But in a sense, we've already gone through one real seismic shift all at once.
I think you're about to see what we have not seen that you saw in the Reagan years. There was a cultural backlash against a lot of the culture war positions of the 60s, where, you know, even the boomers who had embraced them were very sheepish about it. They would make advertisements making fun of themselves, their younger selves, and the ideas they had, right? That has yet to happen. If anything, the culture stances have only gone further on the nominal left. I hesitate to call it that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Reagan came in and boom. If you were talking about free love and pot, you sounded like a moron. Like immediately that just became something that made you sound like, oh, you were one of those and you haven't grown up yet. That shift, I believe, is coming.
Please clap.